Let's browse through the papers now, International Paper Review with Deeptika Laurent. Morning again to you, Deepti. Olympic Games is beginning tonight and dominating the press.
That's right. The games have arrived. Some might say finally, Hala. That's what the Wall Street Journal says with this picture of Brazilian surfer Rico de Souza, who's literally surfing in the flame to Rio that he did yesterday. Now, on the front page of the website Folha de Sao Paulo, they report that visitors have also flocked, of course, to Rio's famous Corcovado statue of Christ, while O Globo reports that organizers say the games aim to promote tolerance and diversity. They say, I quote, "While Athens was classic, Beijing was grandiose, and London was smart, the Rio Games will be cool."
You don't get much cooler than surfing your way in with the Olympic torch, do you? But there are some serious concerns which the papers are looking at, notably security.
That's right. Around 100,000 security personnel have been deployed around Rio to ensure the safety of athletes, delegations, and visitors during the Olympics. That's what O Globo reports. But that hasn't stopped shootings from happening, which are actually a constant reality, of course, in the Brazilian favelas. That's according to Folha de Sao Paulo, the paper I mentioned before. These favelas are actually near the quick lanes that will be used by Olympic athletes. Just on Wednesday and Thursday, for instance, this week, 8 shootings occurred in 2 very well-known neighborhoods.
Another big story, a Deepti moving away from the Olympics now and turning to South Africa. They're holding their local elections, of course, and it's not looking very good for Jacob Zuma's ANC, is it?
Not at all. In fact, the South African paper Business Day says national support may slip to 55% for Zuma's ANC party. According to the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, a dip below 60% is a, quote, huge psychological blow and could be interpreted as the, quote, demise of the movement. Now, the ANC takes a hit. That's what this Afrikaans language newspaper reports. Voters have given the ANC party a, quote, historic rebuke. And now, behind the scenes, negotiations are frantically beginning about possible coalitions. Now, just staying with the same paper, in an opinion piece, a writer says he remembers voting in 1994 when Nelson Mandela founded that ANC party. And he says, this week's election is just as significant, just as important. Whatever the result is, he says, it's a lesson to political parties that the vote of the citizen counts, and not just during election time. I quote, he says, the time where they could persuade people with a free T-shirt is nearing its end.
Yes, and just as we're talking, the ANC has now conceded defeat in that Port Elizabeth municipality. So certainly we can expect more of these stories to keep coming in. For now, let's move on to a fairly harrowing story coming out of the Wall Street Journal this morning about mass rape in South Sudan.
It's really harrowing. It makes for very hard reading, but it is an important story. Hundreds of women in South Sudan were raped during a resurgence of violence last month in the young country. That's what the UN said yesterday. That's according to the Wall Street Journal. Now, most of the women and girls were allegedly raped by government soldiers, although there are reported rapes by rebel soldiers as well. Some of these assaults actually took place outside the gate of a UN camp in Juba. And shockingly, peacekeepers couldn't do anything about it because it was outside their jurisdiction. But it's not just rape, Hala. The Washington Post reports that the violence has also provoked famine, with some mothers so hungry they can't even breastfeed their own children anymore. Now, that violence in South Sudan came, of course, after President Salva Kiir sacked his VP Riek Machar, and violence ensued between the two supporters of the two men.
An ongoing conflict and dire humanitarian situation. Let's move on to something slightly happier now, and it's happy birthday, Mr. President. Barack Obama turned 55, celebrating not with candles and a cake, but by penning an essay in Glamour magazine.
That's right. After Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, Barack Obama is the latest leader to declare himself a feminist. He wrote this very long essay that you can read about in Glamour magazine, which is sort of a reflective piece about his life and his time in the White House as it comes to an end. And he says in this piece that it's important his daughters know he's a feminist because, quote, that's what they should expect of all men. The US president also admits that he didn't really participate in his fair share of the housework before becoming president. But ironically, since being in the White House all together with his kids, he's been able to spend a lot more time with his children and his wife, of course.
OK, we'll finish up quickly with the story out of Singapore, where a humble food stall was caught the eye of the famed Michelin guide.
This is a great story. It's on the front page of the China Daily Hala. Chan Hong Meng used to be a hawker, or a street peddler as some might call it. He now holds a tiny food stand in Singapore's neighborhood of Chinatown. And it turns out that his prized soy sauce braised chicken has seduced the Michelin Guide judges, who awarded him 1 star for their inaugural Singapore Guide last month. It's the cheapest dish on the Michelin Guide. It costs $1.85. And not surprisingly, his queues have been snaking well outside his tiny stall. But I have a feeling those prices will go up eventually.
We imagine so. Thanks very much, Steve. Tika Lahon with the International Press.